Hey everybody, what's going on? Deciding to try this new platform, um, or not a new platform. It's Facebook. I'm on now. Now we're doing this on the Facebooks. So, hello everybody, welcome. I have not done this on the Facebook group before, so this is brand new. But I thought we'd start doing these streams a little bit more. This is simultaneously going to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, I believe. Yes, Twitch. So thanks to everybody who's joining us and anybody who might watch this after the video is over. This is going to be a Twin Peaks centered video, obviously. And it's just going to be sort of an open discussion. Twin Peaks on ABC versus the other Twin Peaks, because they are very different worlds. They're very, very unique worlds to their own. Obviously, one is primetime television in the very late 80s, very early 90s. And that kind of necessitates a certain kind of storytelling, especially on TV at that time. And then we have Fire Walk with Me, which may or may not, might have been 1 in 3 Twin Peaks movies that we would have gotten it if it had done well at the time. Now, of course, it is revered, and it's a lot of people's favorite David Lynch movie. But again, the tone of Fire Walk with Me falls in line with what we got in The Return. Some could even say it's a middle point. It's almost, you have the convergence of The Return and ABC, the ABC run, the original run in the movie, and you can kind of see both worlds blending there. So that's kind of the middle ground for Twin Peaks watching. Twin Peaksing. I don't know what you call it. But it's a conversation I like to bring up because I feel like there's a lot of, I feel like in a lot of ways they're incomparable. People say, the new Twin Peaks, The Return, is not Twin Peaks. I don't necessarily agree with that, because then are you saying the Fire Walk with Me is also not Twin Peaks? Is the only Twin Peaks the first 6, the first season of Twin Peaks? Is that the only? Is that the real Twin Peaks? Is that pure? You could even go to the pilot and end there, and that's Twin Peaks, and that's it. So I always think the arguments, the sort of purist arguments when it comes to Twin Peaks are kind of silly, because it's all Twin Peaks. It's all Twin Peaks. It's all takes place more or less in the same world. Not getting into too much of the lore of the world or whatever they set up in The Return, because now there might be multiple dimensions at work. But I just like to have the conversation of how people feel about the distinction between Twin Peaks or types of Twin Peaks. Obviously, there is a difference between the show that was made for primetime television in the late 80s, and what we got in 2017 and what we got in Twin Peaks The Return. So for those watching, please let me know what your feelings are in the comment section, and we could start this conversation. Are you somebody? And now I'm not sort of picking on anybody. Everybody has their own opinions and feelings about it. But I'm just curious to know if you're somebody that doesn't feel like the Twin Peaks that we got in The Return is Twin Peaks. Do you feel like it's disconnected or disjointed from the original series? Do you more see it as something that's fluid and it occupies? It is the same world consistently. Do you feel the same way about all of it? How do you feel about Fire Walk with Me in the sort of the grand scheme of the 3 iterations is what I'll call it. And we'll leave out the books for now because those have their own tone and pacing and themes themselves. So I just want to leave those out of this particular conversation because I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting conversation because a lot of people are very still of the mindset that the pure true Twin Peaks um, is the original run. And again, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I just want to have the conversation because it's interesting. Because for me, I see it all as Twin Peaks. It is consistent. It is all Twin Peaks. Obviously, tonally, the movie and the return are not the same as the primetime made for primetime television series in the late 80s. That is a very of the time thing. Um, in a way, because Fire Walk with Me came out not too long after the series ended. So obviously that was always in the sort of the pathos in the mind of at least David Lynch. And Mark Frost didn't really have much to do with the movie. But it was always sort of the vision of David Lynch, and he always wanted to explore the story in that way. And even the primetime series was always, trying to push the boundaries a little bit, and especially in terms of themes and discussion on the show. Obviously, they couldn't really show too much or couldn't say things in a certain way. And I feel like Fire Walk with Me really opened the door to what Twin Peaks really was. And that's kind of my argument for why the return is Twin Peaks. It's not lesser Twin Peaks. It's not, it's not side Twin Peaks. It is Twin Peaks because I think the original intent and motivation behind Twin Peaks is what we get in Fire Walk with Me, and then even more so in the return. Obviously, a lot of those themes and ideas and whatnot, story, obviously David Lynch and Mark Frost have developed as writers and storytellers, but I think Twin Peaks was always supposed to be what we got in the return in some respect. It's weird to see arguments against the return because it makes it seem like it's not Twin Peaks. It's sort of like this manifestation of David Lynch or Mark Frost in like 2013, 2014. And it does have a lot of more timely elements to it, of course. But I think, especially going through the funnel, funnel to the return, that is Fire Walk with Me. I think Twin Peaks has always been more headed that way anyway. It was always motivated by that kind of thing that we got in the return than it was, primetime television world, which is very contained and monitored and, yes, a lot of people saying yes and no to certain things, and there's a lot you can and cannot do on TV, especially then. And even then, they were trying to break some rules. But my argument is, and I love the original series, I'm not giving any flack. I think it's all great. Of course, it's not perfect, but I just think the argument that the return is lesser or not Twin Peaks is, I don't know, that doesn't sit right with me, because I think it definitely is, and I think it's probably the truest version of Twin Peaks that we've gotten besides Fire Walk with Me. I think it was always meant to be something like we got in the return, at least in the mind of Mark Frost and David Lynch. It was always that world anyway. And then, of course, updated changes and alterations to be more timely and relevant to today's world. And I get the argument that Twin Peaks is supposed to happen or take place in Twin Peaks, but I think also, again, you have to sort of think, this was a primetime TV show. They did want to go out further. The whole James and Evelyn storyline, they wanted to expand further, but they could only go so far because sets are expensive, traveling to shoot is expensive, and obviously filming equipment is not as affordable as it is today. So I think it's an interesting argument to say that the return is not at its core Twin Peaks. So I think Twin Peaks was always supposed to be, in an ideal fashion, I think Twin Peaks was always supposed to be this expanded world and not supposed to be Twin Peaks. It's very holistic, and it's about sort of uh, again the heart of people, and sort of a commentary on television, and it's multifaceted art, which is why all of us love it so much. It kind of covers a lot of ground. And so I really believe that Twin Peaks is always, even the original run at its heart, was supposed to be a lot closer to what the return was. Um, I mean, there's just so much that could have happened if without the limitations of primetime TV rules. I just try to imagine what that show would have been if it had been on HBO instead of ABC. Because I feel like HBO was the it place at that time. Um, and when I think about it in that way, it feels like we probably would have gotten something like The Return. Obviously, there's been a lot of a lot of updates and a lot of more timely adjustments to the storytelling. But I think if Twin Peaks in 1989 got picked up by HBO, or Northwest Passage got picked up by HBO, we would have gotten something a lot closer to Fire Walk with Me, at least. Maybe not The Return, but I think it would have been more in line with Fire Walk with Me, because that seemed to be where the heart of that show really was that whole time, and they tried to push it. They really tried to push it on the primetime show, but obviously there's a lot of hands in the pots, that we all know the story, and it kind of ended up sort of killing itself in a lot of ways by trying to be something it just wasn't. And I think that thing that it wasn't was a primetime TV show. And I think it was always supposed to be meant for this format, like it was brought to everybody on Showtime, where it was this really intense commentary on violence, TV violence, violence against women, trauma, drugs, sort of all these sort of dark, seedy underbelly, Blue Velvet, thematic things that happen. There's a lot of parallels to that movie in Twin Peaks, and more subtle and obvious ways, of course. But I think that is the pathway. Like, you have Blue Velvet, and then Twin Peaks is, it was probably supposed to be a lot more tonally like Blue Velvet in terms of the sort of intensity of it, and sort of maturity level of it. Obviously, Blue Velvet, would not have been as effective if it was a made for TV thing, for obvious ways. But like, just imagining the mechanics that go into making a film and then making something for television, especially during that time, I think obviously it handicaps a lot. And some people, I do love the original series, but again, there's this weird discussion of purity of Twin Peaks and what really is and isn't Twin Peaks. And of course, I'm a newer age of fans. I watched it. Well, now I've been a fan for about 10 years. So it's always interesting to see, I came in at a certain point before the return was even announced, but I had watched the original run and Firewalk Me countless times by the time the return was announced. So I was able to, get in there, feel that kind of weight of not, having more, learning and being really involved in the world. And then not, maybe not getting any more. And then 4 years later, found out we're getting more Twin Peaks. So that's really exciting. But it also helps me, also gets me thinking, what would that original run have been like if there had been the sort of Showtime or HBO opportunity then? Obviously, probably wouldn't have happened, because there wasn't sort of the brand equity of Twin Peaks that it had, in 2013, where there was still conversation. People still wanted more. There was missing pieces, and there was still Twin Peaks grumblings for a long time. And now it seems pretty consistent. It seems maybe stronger than ever. But again, I wasn't around during the whole 25 years. I've only been a fan for the last 10. So it's interesting. But I just think it's an odd way to go about it. Saying that the return, I just keep seeing this conversation come up where the return, people are saying the return is like a lesser version of Twin Peaks, when I think it is probably the most Twin Peaks, like it's the most ideal version of that story. Maybe not completely, but I think it is the most ideal version that it can be, and I'm sure it could go even further. If David Lynch and Mark Frost are kind of just, somebody gives them a blank check, I'm pretty sure then we'll get the most pure version of Twin Peaks that comes, right from their minds to the page to the screen. Hey, Jason, what's up? So it's just interesting. And I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm like, well, if Twin Peaks was premiered on HBO, let's say that for some reason HBO is like, let's take a shot on this David Lynch show. If it had even been brought to their door, this is the guy that made Blue Velvet. We all like Blue Velvet. It's it's a great at that point. It's a great movie. We should get this guy to do something for us. And obviously, later on things happen. But I'm just thinking, imagine if the original run premiered or was created for something like HBO. I don't think it would have been the Twin Peaks we got on ABC. I think it would have been something like we got in the Return, which I could be wrong. I'm curious to see what other people think about the subject. But I think it would have been, even at the beginning, a lot like at least Fire Walk With Me, or something more along the lines of Blue Velvet levels of intensity, and maybe the Return even then. So it's a weird. I don't want to dismiss the debate, because I like that the conversation's still going on, but I think it's a weird debate to say of one version of Twin Peaks is lesser than the other, when I think they all kind of more or less are of the same thing. I mean, I think obviously Fire Walk With Me and the Return, I think I put them in one category because that's kind of a lot less tethered to sort of, there are a lot more rules to primetime television, especially, and I keep reiterating this point, especially in the late 80s and early 90s. And I can't help shaking the idea that we would have gotten a very visceral version of Twin Peaks in the 90s, or late 80s, and I'm wondering if that had happened that way, and if it was picked up by sort of a cable channel instead of a primetime television channel, what that would have looked like, if it would have had the same impact. Because I think in a lot of ways, it being on primetime television is what made it kind of magical. You were able to put that intensity in a box. And really play with the rules of television, which is, again, part of what that show is pushing the boundaries and playing around with what you can discuss and commenting on television itself. Obviously, there's Invitation to Love, which is a meta commentary kind of thing, and it's just super interesting. But I just feel like at its heart, it always wanted to be more, and we saw that in the episodes that Lynch directed, and then the specific episodes he directed in season 2. Obviously, Maddie's murder, super intense for primetime television, super intense. It's impactful. Some people, I've seen old reviews saying it was a little too much for television in 1990, I think, when that episode premiered. Could be wrong. But it's just it's just super interesting because I think again, I think it's weird to say that the return is a lesser Twin Peaks because I think again I think excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I think it is probably the truest to the original um, vision um, of that story and the way those characters were going to play out. Especially, there's the Shelley and Leo story, and that. I mean, I think out of all the stories in that show, that one still bothers me the most. It's still. I mean, you have the whole Laura Palmer, and she's troubled, it's almost like her, maybe I could put myself in the show, and it's almost like her troubles were so far beyond, really, really internalizing, and I think that's kind of what the characters in the show feel. It's like they all knew. It's like Bobby said, they all knew she was in trouble, and nobody did anything. And I think it's because her problems just seemed so, they piled up en masse, and there was so many layers to peel back. And it's like, what are you supposed to do about somebody like a Laura Palmer? How do you help somebody like a Laura Palmer? That's just like, not the trouble happens to her, but a lot of times she puts herself in trouble's way also. So it's really difficult. I think that's why maybe the Leo and Shelley story really, I mean, still upsetting because you saw the progression of that play out. You saw that violence in real time. And I don't think Shelley specifically gets a lot of the I don't know, and I don't think attention is the right word, but I don't think she gets a lot of the remorse and compassion that Laura got. But again, Laura did die and Shelley did not. And Shelley was sort of figured out a way out of it, but again, she kind of suffered from the same thing that Laura did by, having opportunities to do better, but getting in harm's way. But also, she's kind of being a victim to violence by her husband, which, depending on the story and the way you interpret it, apparently was a lot kinder. Maybe that's not even the right word. Was just not as much Leo Johnson as we saw in the series when they first met. But it's hard to say. I don't think there's too much context that we have there, but I could be forgetting something. Hello. How's everybody doing? Anyway, what do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about sort of the original inception of Twin Peaks? Do you think it was originally supposed to be something a lot like The Return? What form do you think it was supposed to take? If you take it out of the realm of ABC, of what we had, what do you think would have served that story better? Do you think the story would have been served better in a capacity like The Return, maybe, but without the primetime magic that or rules that came with having it on ABC? We're kind of working with a little bit of revisionist kind of history thing, kind of recontextualizing what the original series could have been. Because again, Fire Walk with Me and The Return are pretty thematically, tonally similar, and pacing is similar, and a lot of the beats are similar, and just those worlds meshed. I could see, you could see those worlds totally working in tandem. And Fire Walk with Me, I mean, the original series kind of funnels through Fire Walk with Me in that way. So I'm just wondering how you think it would have worked if Twin Peaks, the original series, the ABC series, wasn't on ABC and was on something like HBO. Do you think it still would have been the same? Do you think it would have been sort of the same, more or less, Twin Peaks that we got on ABC, or do you think it would have been something like The Return? I'm just curious what people think. I know it's probably not an easy question to ask because we won't ever really know. But my current suspicion is that we would have gotten something a lot more like The Return or Fire Walk with Me from the get go if they were given the opportunity, kind of free reign to play with these stories and themes, especially with their severity and whatnot. Just something to think about. And if you're watching this after the fact, after the stream, please let me know in the comments what your thoughts and feelings are on this subject. I think it's pretty interesting conversation. And I'm curious to see how people, would have interpreted, or how you think people would have interpreted a Twin Peaks that maybe originally premiered on HBO or something like that. We'll see. Anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there before I just keep, rambling. Hopefully everybody's doing well. We just got done with our, tropical storm today. It was a little nuts. But I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you guys soon. Take care. And if you're new, please subscribe. That'd be really cool. All right, guys. See you later.